I was standing at the sink, pretending to rinse a glass I'd already washed twice. The sound of the faucet was the only thing filling the silence between us. Victor sat at the counter, eyes glued to his phone like it was the only thing in the room that mattered. I finally broke the quiet. "You've been coming home late a lot," I said, not looking at him. "And you keep stepping outside to take calls." My heart wasn't racing, but it was waiting to be told I was imagining things. Again. He didn't even flinch, just chuckled under his breath like I was a child asking if monsters were real. "You're being paranoid again," he said, tapping away at his screen. "You always imagine things that aren't real." The way he said "again" settled in my chest like a stone. I wanted to scream, to slam a plate, to shake him, but I didn't. I just stood there, holding that same glass, now shaking slightly in my hands. I wanted to believe him. God, I really did. Because believing him was easier than accepting what I already knew in my gut. But there's something that happens when you're gaslit long enough. You stop trusting your own eyes, your own voice. Still, something inside me stirred that night. It wasn't rage or heartbreak. It was clarity. I wasn't crazy, and I was done asking for truth. I'd find it on my own. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Victor snored beside me like he didn't just make me question my own sanity a few hours earlier. He had this uncanny ability to turn concern into accusation, to make me feel like I was the problem for noticing something was wrong. It wasn't new. He'd done it before, casually brushing off missed calls or disappearing for hours with a simple, "Relax, Jules, you overthink everything." And I'd believe him, until the gnawing returned. You start wondering if maybe you're too emotional, too sensitive, too much. That's how it works. They chip away at you, one little, "you're imagining things" at a time. And you shrink yourself to fit into the version of reality they've built for you. But I was done shrinking. I was done second-guessing the pit in my stomach that twisted every time he locked his phone or paused mid-text when I walked by. That pit, that was survival. That was instinct. So I made a decision. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, in the dead stillness of 2:13 a.m., when I reached for my phone under the covers and opened a tab I never thought I'd visit. How to track a car discreetly. I wasn't going to ask where he'd been. I wasn't going to beg for answers he'd just twist into accusations. This time, I was going to let the facts speak louder than my fear. The next morning, I made his coffee just the way he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, and a smile I no longer meant. He kissed my forehead and said, "You're quiet today." I just laughed. Probably just tired. He nodded, already scrolling through his phone again. I watched the way he turned it slightly, angling it away from me, like muscle memory, like hiding had become second nature, and maybe it had. Later that day, while he was at work, I drove to a nondescript shop a few neighborhoods over, one I'd researched all night. The man behind the counter barely asked questions. Just handed me a small, discreet device and said, "Battery lasts about 10 days. You'll get real-time updates on your phone." My hands trembled as I took it. Not from fear, from the thrill of finally doing something instead of sitting in silence, waiting for someone else to hand me my truth. That evening, I stood in the garage alone, staring at Victor's car. I crouched beside the bumper and secured the tracker underneath. Quick, clean, invisible. And as I straightened up and wiped my palms on my jeans, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not yet, just a readiness, a quiet certainty. Because when someone calls you paranoid long enough, you start to doubt yourself. But not anymore. I wasn't crazy. I was just waiting for confirmation. For a few days, life played out like clockwork. Victor left in the morning, came back around 6, kissed my cheek, and asked what was for dinner. The tracker showed the same path every time. Home to office, office to gym, gym to home. I almost wanted to believe I'd made a mistake. That maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth, and this little device was proof of my overthinking. But that doubt was short-lived. I knew better. Patterns are only comforting when they're real. I'd check the app casually, pretending to scroll through social media while I was really tracking his every move in real time. Every green dot that landed exactly where it was supposed to gave me a strange sense of calm. False, fleeting calm. But I also knew lies don't keep the same rhythm forever. They slip, they get lazy. And one day, when he told me he had a late client dinner at a steakhouse across town, I waited a few minutes and checked, and there it was. That green dot wasn't at a restaurant. It wasn't anywhere near food or clients. It was parked, dead still, outside a local motel with a faded neon sign and hourly rates. I just stared at it, frozen. My fingers hovered over the screen like touching it would make it less real. I refreshed the app. Still there. My body went cold like something inside me had cracked, but I didn't cry. I took a screenshot. Then I waited 20 minutes and took another. Same dot, same lie, same man. I sat alone in the living room, lit only by the blue glow of the tracker app on my phone. Every few seconds I'd swipe down to refresh, half hoping he'd moved, half hoping he hadn't. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were listening. My breath was shallow, controlled. I wasn't going to panic. Not yet. This wasn't a guess. This wasn't a hunch. This was data. And data doesn't lie. I thought back to all the times he'd dismissed me, all the times I'd stood right here and said, something doesn't feel right, only to be told I was imagining things. But this glowing dot on the map, it felt like justice. Quiet justice. The kind that doesn't scream or throw plates, but just knows. I wasn't going to let emotion cloud what I had worked so hard to see clearly. I'd asked enough questions. I had my answer. And yet my heart ached, not because I didn't expect it, but because now I couldn't unknow it. Because knowing strips away the last shred of hope you cling to. Hope that maybe it was just stress, or work, or a phase. But this wasn't a phase. It was a pattern. And tonight, that pattern finally exposed itself. Not in a fight, not in a confession, but in a blinking green dot that stayed exactly where it shouldn't have been. I could have called him right then. Could have asked, "How's dinner?" just to hear the lie come out of his mouth in real time. But what would that have changed? He'd lie. He always did. And I'd hang up, feeling that same hollow ache in my chest. No. I needed more than words. I needed something I could hold in my hands, something undeniable. I wasn't going to interrupt his evening. I was going to document it. So I sat there, still, quiet, deliberate. I ordered takeout. Thai. My favorite. And while I ate, I kept checking the app like it was the evening news. Victor remained parked at the same spot for over an hour. That was no client dinner. That was intimacy disguised as business. I even imagined her face. Probably the same one I'd seen at a work party. Someone I'd smiled at without knowing. I'd learn who she was soon enough. And as I cleared the dishes, I felt something unfamiliar rush through me. Not sadness, not rage. Resolve. I had everything I needed to move forward. I didn't need to accuse. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to act, quietly, strategically. And I would, because when you've been made to feel crazy for long enough, there's a power in knowing you're not. I had the proof. Now, I just had to decide what to do with it. I waited 2 more days, not because I needed more proof, but because I wanted the right moment. Timing mattered now. I tracked him again, watching his usual routine fall into place like a well-rehearsed performance. Work, gym, home. And then, like clockwork, he told me he had another client thing. This time, his voice was even smoother, like he was doing me a favor by telling me in advance. "Don't wait up," he said. And I didn't. I watched his little green dot travel across the city, curve onto the freeway, and stop, right outside the same sad motel with the flickering vacancy sign. My hands were steady this time. I grabbed my phone, a hoodie, and my keys. No hesitation, no second guessing. I drove with the kind of calm that only comes when grief has turned into purpose. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to see it, with my own eyes. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. My shoes hit the pavement with a rhythm that steadied me. I passed vending machines buzzing in the night and cigarette butts crushed into the sidewalk like forgotten truths. And then I saw it. His car, parked in the shadows. Same license plate. Same dent in the rear bumper. I took a photo, flash off. My breath stayed even. My hands didn't shake. I was done being afraid of the truth. A few minutes later, I spotted him, walking up to the entrance with a woman by his side. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm like they'd done this before. I didn't recognize her face, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the way he looked at her. Relaxed, familiar, like this was their version of normal. I stayed hidden behind a row of shrubs across the lot, my phone recording every step they took. They didn't rush. That's what hit me hardest. They weren't trying to be discreet. He wasn't even pretending to be careful. I watched him hold the door open for her, watched her lean in close like they'd been rehearsing this scene for weeks, maybe months. I caught it all. Their walk, the door, the moment they disappeared inside. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just stopped recording, tucked my phone in my coat pocket, and walked back to my car. There's a kind of silence that wraps around you when the denial finally dies. Not grief, not anger, just a pure, ringing stillness. I didn't feel broken. I felt sharpened, like I'd just stepped out of a fog. On the way home, I opened my camera roll and watched the footage once, maybe twice, not to torture myself, but to anchor myself in truth. And by the time I pulled into our driveway, I knew exactly what the next step had to be. When he came home that night, he smelled like mint and someone else's perfume. He wrapped his arms around me like he hadn't just spent the evening betraying everything we'd built. Long night, he muttered into my hair, pressing a kiss to my cheek. I didn't pull away. I smiled. Thanks for trusting me, he added, with a voice so smooth it almost passed as genuine. Almost. I looked him in the eye and said, always. He had no idea what those words now meant. I served him dinner, his favorite, roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, the works. I made sure the wine was chilled, the music low, the atmosphere perfect. He ate like a man completely at ease, completely unaware, and I played along. Because this was no longer about emotion, this was about execution. Every nod, every smile, every "how was your day?" all of it part of a new script I was writing, and he wasn't the star of it anymore. Later that night, when he showered, I transferred the video and screenshots to a secure drive. Backed up twice. I labeled the folder just in case. Not because I needed it to confront him. I wouldn't waste the satisfaction on a private argument. No, I had something much bigger in mind. Something he wouldn't see coming. And for once, I wasn't afraid of the next step. I was ready for it. Planning the dinner was almost therapeutic. I picked the guest list carefully, Victor's parents, a few of his closest friends, some co-workers he always tried to impress. I even invited his boss, which made him puff up with pride when I mentioned it. "You're really going all out, huh?" he said, kissing my forehead. "You deserve to be celebrated," I replied, handing him a glass of wine. He smiled, completely unaware of what I was really preparing. The evening arrived like any other celebration. Laughter, small talk, clinking glasses. I wore the navy dress he once said made me look like a woman who gets what she wants. How fitting. I played the perfect host, floating from guest to guest, asking about work, life, the kids. Victor basked in it, soaking up the praise. "She's amazing, right?" he told someone behind me. I smiled. "Oh, Victor, you haven't seen amazing yet." After dessert, I stood up and clinked my glass. Everyone turned toward me expecting a toast. I looked at him, so proud, so certain, and said, "Before we end the night, I made a little something, just a quick video, a walk down memory lane." Someone dimmed the lights. Victor raised his glass, still grinning. Then the screen lit up, and the first image flickered on. It started sweet. Vacation photos, birthday dinners, little videos of us dancing in the kitchen. Laughter filled the room. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms slung around the back like a king at his throne. But then, the music shifted. The screen showed a new image, the GPS tracking app. A blinking green dot parked outside a motel. A timestamp. Another. Another. The room fell quiet, laughter dissolving into puzzled silence. Victor sat up straight, his smile faltering. Gasps broke through as the next clip played. Grainy footage of Victor holding the door for another woman, her hand grazing his back. A voice somewhere whispered, "Is that?" But the question didn't need answering. On screen, they walked into the motel together. Clear, undeniable. There was no context that could save him. His mother's face went pale. His best friend blinked hard like he'd just been slapped. And Victor? He froze, absolutely motionless. I stepped forward, glass in hand. The screen faded to black behind me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked out at the stunned faces around the table and said, "They say women like me are paranoid, but sometimes paranoia is just your gut telling you the truth nobody else wants you to see." I turned to Victor, who couldn't meet my eyes. "So, cheers to trusting your instincts, even when it makes you the villain in someone else's story." No one moved at first. It was as if the entire room had lost its breath. Then came the murmurs. His coworkers looked down at their plates, embarrassed just to be there. His father cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. His mother quietly placed her napkin on the table and stood. But Victor? He just sat there, jaw clenched, eyes darting, scrambling for a lie that could survive what everyone had just witnessed. There wasn't one. I didn't wait for him to speak. I didn't need a confession. I'd already gotten what I came for. The truth, unveiled in front of the very people whose opinions he valued most. Let him deal with the wreckage. He'd built it. I offered warm goodbyes to our guests as they awkwardly filed out, some hugging me, some avoiding eye contact. One of them whispered, "You didn't deserve this." And I smiled gently. I know. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, the house was quiet again. Except now, that silence didn't suffocate me. It felt clean. Like the air after a storm. I gathered the empty glasses, folded the linen napkins, and placed them on the counter. Victor was still sitting at the table, stunned, small. But I had no more words for him. I didn't need them. The real conversation had already happened, in front of everyone. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. Not easy, but quiet, in a way I hadn't felt in years. Victor tried to reach out. Of course he did. First with excuses, then with apologies, then silence. But it was too late for all of it. His world unraveled quickly. His parents stopped returning his calls. The co-workers who once admired him now kept their distance. And that other woman? She disappeared like smoke once exposure touched her skin. I packed my things one morning, methodically, like I was folding up the last pages of a book I never wanted to finish. No drama, no shouting, just closure, one drawer at a time. The apartment felt smaller with every box I filled, not because it had shrunk, but because I had grown. I left my key on the table next to the wedding photo he hadn't bothered to remove. And as I closed the door behind me, I didn't cry. I exhaled. I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just mine. A place where I could leave shoes in the middle of the floor and burn candles that smelled like eucalyptus and clean starts. My hands were calloused from building shelves, hanging curtains, putting things in their place. And in a way, that's what I was doing with myself too. Rebuilding, one small act of self-trust at a time. It wasn't a dramatic reinvention. It was a quiet return to the woman I'd always been. Some nights I'd sit on my new couch with a cup of tea, scrolling through stories from women who had gone through the same thing. Women who'd been told they were too emotional, too suspicious, too much. I started leaving comments, words of encouragement, sometimes just a heart. Other times I'd share my story, piece by piece. Not to relive it, but to remind someone out there, you're not crazy. Your instincts are speaking. Listen to them. A few of them messaged me. Quiet thanks, tearful relief. I thought I was alone, they'd write, and every time I'd respond the same way. You're not, and you're not wrong. I didn't become some kind of hero. I wasn't trying to be. I just knew what it felt like to doubt your own reflection, to sleep beside someone who made you question reality. And now that I was finally out of that storm, the least I could do was light a lantern for someone else. Healing didn't look like a dramatic transformation. It looked like grocery shopping without panic, waking up without checking his schedule, smiling at my own reflection in the morning light, not to perform, but because I felt okay. And every time I reached for the bookshelf I built with my own 2 hands, I remembered. I wasn't broken. I was just lied to. And now? Now I was telling the truth, out loud and unashamed. One afternoon, my best friend dropped by, carrying takeout, and that look she always had when she was about to say something inappropriate. She stepped inside, glanced around the apartment, and let out a low whistle. Well, damn. Look at you, Miss Independent. She ran her hand along the bookshelf I had just finished anchoring to the wall. So, I guess you weren't paranoid after all, huh? I laughed. Not bitter, not hollow, just free. Paranoia doesn't come with proof, I said. But I did. That night, I lit a candle and curled up by the window with a book. Not to escape, but because I wanted to enjoy the silence that now belonged to me. The kind of silence that no longer needed to be filled with questions or doubt. Outside, the city buzzed on like nothing had happened. But inside, something big had. I had stopped apologizing for my instincts. I had stopped needing someone else's permission to trust myself. And I knew. This wouldn't be the last storm I faced. Life doesn't promise that. But it would be the last time I'd ignore the weather report coming from inside my own chest. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once you reclaim your voice, no one gets to silence it again.